Continuing my exploration of solitaire print and play games, I played Dungeon in a Tin. As the name suggests, this is a very small game. All of the components fit in one A4 sheet of paper. Then you also have 2 pages of rules that you can print, or you can just read them on your computer screen. This is a dungeon crawl where you play the role of a hero exploring a dungeon, trying to find and rescue a princess that is kept prisoner there. But of course, on your way, you will encounter a lot of ugly monsters that will try to stop you and will try to show you that it would have been better for you to stay home. This is the general idea. Let's see how the game plays. You start the game with the pawn representing your hero on the dungeon tile with the stairs. Then you have a little display to keep track of the health of your character. You start with 5 points of health. You also start with a potion. It is one of the 3 items that you can carry. You cannot carry more than 3 items at a time. And you also start the game with 2 combat cards drawn from that deck. During the game you may be able to level up, and when you level up, your hand of combat cards becomes larger because your hand will be your level plus 1. So you start at level 1, 2 cards, you level up to level 2, then you get 3 cards in your hand. If you start your turn in a tile that has no monsters in it, then you can perform one or more of several optional actions. You can drink a potion if you have one, and that restores your health entirely. You can pick up treasures from the floor of the room if there are treasures there. And if your hand of combat cards is not at its maximum level, then you can draw cards until you reach the maximum level. You cannot discard cards if you don't like them. You have to keep them, but you can go back to the maximum. Then you can move to the next area of the dungeon by drawing a tile from the dungeon deck and connecting it to the tile where you are. Then you move to the new tile, and the tile will probably have some monsters there waiting for you. May also have 1 or more treasure chests, but of course you have to defeat the monsters before you can put your hands on the treasures. There are 2 categories of monsters in this game, the red category and the yellow category. The red category indicated by the white skulls on the map, and the red category by red skulls. To determine the type of monsters that you will encounter, you can use custom dice with the faces of the monsters on them, but if you're not very crafty, if you don't want to make custom dice, then you can use this conversion table that you can find on Board Game Geek. You roll a die, you cross-reference the category, and you find the monster that you are encountering. For example, I have 2 monsters there in the yellow category. One is the category 3, or better, the monster 3 in the yellow category. And the other one is the monster 4. Here it is. Now I had to find those monsters. I can find them in any order. I choose to find this one first. The monster rolls a die to determine the attack that the monster will use. And again, you can make custom dice to determine the type of attack of the monster, a custom die with the symbols on it, or you can just use the conversion table. In this case, for example, the monster has attacked me with an attack of 5. That means the monster uses a thrust against me. Now I have to play a card to respond to that. The cards that I have in my hand at the present time are a thrust and a overhead, and at the bottom of the card I am told what the effect of that card will be to respond to a certain attack. For example, if I respond to the monster's thrust with an overhead, then I'm gonna get a -1. Overhead gives me -1 versus a thrust. And another thrust simply has no effect against the thrust of the enemy. So I could play this one to get 0 modifiers because there's no thrust, no versus thrust effect on it, or I could play this one for a -1. Why would I ever want to do that? However, I can also choose to randomly draw a card from the deck of combat cards, but then I have to accept the result that I get. So I could choose to have a 0 modifier, but I want to be brave. I'm gonna draw a card instead, but now what I draw I had to accept, That wasn't very lucky. I draw this card, it gives me -2, and I have to play this one. Then I roll again to resolve the actual attack, and this is not good, because I have to apply the modifier from the combat card. If the monster has horns, then the monster is particularly powerful. I get a -1. If I'm using a special weapon like a bomb, I may have a positive bonus. If I am escorting Little Red Riding Hood, well, not really, the princess, out of the dungeon, which is really what you're trying to do. You're trying to find her and to escort her out of the dungeon. Then, while protecting her impedes your movement, so you also have a -1. When you put together all of these minuses and pluses, if the total modified result is 4 or more, then you eliminate the monster. Otherwise, too bad, the monster stays there and inflicts you a hit. In this case, I rolled 2, -2 is 0. I definitely got my butt kicked here. But suppose that I was lucky and instead I'd been able to eliminate all the monsters, then I would be able to draw a treasure from this cup, where there are all these little counters representing the treasures, and suppose that I drew this one. This is the bomb, pretty good, will give me +3 in a combat, even though it is a one-time bonus. A potion, I can draw treasures and add them to my pool. I only have 3 slots where to place treasures. An exception, however, is gold, because I can have as much gold as I want. Oh, that's pretty neat. When I have 10 golds, I can exchange them with any one item. I can just buy an item. Rules say that you have to go back to the initial tile to be able to do that. I house rule that you can just immediately convert your gold into any one item at any point, at any time in the game, because sometimes if you're deep in the dungeon, it can be a little tedious to go back, because when you're going back to a room where you have already been, you still will encounter some monsters. You will encounter half of the monsters that were originally there. In this case, if I go back, I'll have to encounter one monster and not treasures, of course. So go back there and then back to the dungeon where you need the item can take a little while. And finding special items is extremely important, because, for example, you may have to go through this tile here with the chasm, and the only way you can do so is by using the rope. So either you find the rope randomly, or you have to find enough gold to buy it. Certain rooms will need a key to enter, and again, you need to find a key in the dungeon or to find enough money to buy it. And the final tile of the dungeon will always be this one, the one where the princess that you're trying to rescue is. Again, to enter that tile you need a key, so either you find it in the dungeon or you have to buy it. You go back to the initial tile of the dungeon with the princess, you exit the dungeon with her, you save the princess, good job, you win the game. You die trying, clearly you lose the game. This is a sort of micro Wrath of Ashardalon baby Castle Ravenloft. It moves fast, it doesn't last too long, especially if you're very lucky and you find all the right items, or if you house rule that you can buy items with your coins anywhere on the board. You do not have to go back to the initial tile to do so. The combat system is pretty fun. It has a nice push your luck feel to it. In certain cases you have a very powerful attack. It seems like it is a no-brainer to use it, but on the other hand you may also choose to save it for later, for when you may need it more against a more powerful enemy, or maybe when the princess is limiting your ability to fight. But you may also find yourself in a situation where you may choose to play a card that doesn't give you any bonus, but on the other hand doesn't give you a penalty either. But you may choose instead to draw a card that may help you a lot or may damage a lot. So there is that choose your poison, decide whether or not you want to give yourself to luck, which makes things fun and of course does not slow them down, keeps things moving fast, which for a game this small is really crucial to me. Overall, this is a small game that is entertaining to play, doesn't cost a thing to purchase, doesn't take much work to build, and I think it is nice to have it in your collection for when playing Castle Ravenloft or Wrath of Ashardalon is not an option.